Hello, this is James Paterson, and this is the second in the discussion series of auditing in biopharma with Jaap van Oerle. I'm delighted to have you here again, Jaap.
Same here, James.
And then what we did last time is we explained our objectives behind this series, and what I hope we conveyed is why internal auditing is a lot more interesting than people might realise, and also how fascinating it is to work in the pharma industry. You used the great analogy in the last video of thinking about this as a football team and playing a good game of football. We talked about the fact that we would walk through the value chain and explain to those less familiar with the pharmaceutical industry what was in each. But what we also wanted to do was emphasize to people in pharma who maybe don't understand why internal audit is such an interesting place for career, what good modern internal auditing looks like. And so I'm going to hand over to you, Jaap, to say something about the pharma value chain, and we'll walk that through together for this next video.
Sure. So in the last video, we tipped on the fact that the COVID crisis has illustrated to us the complexity of the unknowns that we are facing in this industry, just at the research and development stage that we are in this crisis. But later on, when we progress in the crisis, we'll see that the same happens in manufacturing and sales and marketing. The unknowns is one element, but the other thing that's very critical is that when you get it wrong in R&D, you won't make up for it in manufacturing or in sales and marketing. It's like building your house. If you get it wrong in the foundations, your house will always be shaky. And in the pharmaceutical industry, it's the same thing. If your R&D is not robust, your manufacturing will not make up for it, and your marketing will be a lost effort altogether. So it's critical that internal audit actually provides assurance on the effectiveness of all those functions. So if we start with R&D, what I would like to do is to go back to the very simple, basic function and the need that the organization has for this function. What is their purpose? What are they trying to achieve? And what are these functions contributing to the success of the organization? In very simple terms, because auditors need to understand the foundational purpose of a function that they audit to be able to understand risks. And I'll illustrate this with the examples. So research, what they contribute to the organization is creativity, inventions, and innovation that can be protected by patents, because that will be the basis for every further creation of value in the future. So how do research organizations make sure that their inventions are well protected? That's critical to the business, and therefore internal auditors need to be able to provide assurance on the protection of intellectual property. And likewise, development. What does development do? Their core function is to take those innovations from research to market and into the market entry before the guys from manufacturing and marketing take over. Critical, because development is a very, very costly process, is that the development people make the right choices in which they develop the drugs. If they don't, they'll be wasting company money, and it's crucial to the industry that they make the right choices in developing drugs that will deliver the outcomes that society is expecting. So these are very big bets, and big bets come with big risks, and big risks need to get assurance from internal audit. It's that simple.
Very good. And one thing that I loved, Jaap, and I just want to really emphasize it to people watching this, is you talked about the fact that if you get something wrong at one stage, you can end up with, a fat house with poor foundations. Also, another way of looking at this is pharmaceuticals is very much about where is the weakest link. You could even have a very good product that you've developed, but if you can't manufacture it and supply it in the right way, if you can't distribute it in the right way, you will have problems at that level. So in a sense, pharmaceuticals is such a challenging industry because it really suffers from where its weakest link is. So just to say a few words, as you did, about manufacturing and supply, you can come up as a scientist with this wonderful new drug. So let's imagine that we're looking for the COVID antiviral. You may find it, which is a huge process in itself, but then you've actually got to, having made laboratory level quantity of the drug, you now need to make a massive amount of that drug absolutely safely and at the appropriate quality level, because you're going to start putting this into people. And if this is going to thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people, if you're not making something with the right quality, you're going to be in trouble. And then the other issue here around the value chain, which is supply, which is even if you can make the right quantity of therapies of drugs to meet everybody's needs, you've got to get it in a hygienic, sometimes in a temperature controlled way, with all the right information about how it's to be used and how it's not to be used. You also, if you did discover that there was a problem, heaven forbid, with the drug that you've created, you need to be able to recall it. So there's a massive thing here about labeling the pharmaceuticals in the supply chain and being able to recall things that's very, very different from what you might find in most industries. So again, the opportunities of auditing range from straightforward things like how is that project to construct the new facility going, all the way through to how are we working with third parties to do perhaps some of our distribution and auditing the contracts and the relationships there, or indeed auditing the functions which themselves try to maintain the quality of manufacturing at that stage. You were going to tell us a little bit about marketing and sales, Jaap, but anything to say on manufacture and supply?
Well, I think you summarized it quite well. It's a very complex world and very, very regulated as well, it's got a lot of obligations. And I like the example you gave about the ability to actually recall your product from the market. That's a little bit different for drugs than it is for cars or aircrafts, for instance. So there are some big challenges here.
Great. Marketing and sales.
Marketing and sales. When I entered this industry, I believed that when you have a good drug, what do you need marketing for? Patients will be asking for it, right? It's not that simple, actually. First of all, we're not the only ones in the market as a manufacturer. There is something called competition. Even if you have an innovation, there are alternative therapies. But the role of marketing is to generate the understanding of therapy that actually creates the demand with prescribers and with patients. But that comes with the complexities of affordability, of access, of safety, of pharmacovigilance, and so forth and so forth. So it has a lot of regulations. It has also substantial regulations in the way we have to be ethical in the way the industry markets. And there's a lot of focus points for the internal audit function to zoom into, because the risk taking is quite significant. Whereas for the sales process, it really is about a traditional process of taking the orders, distributing the product, and sending the invoices and collecting the cash. That's not so different, with less complexities than the marketing part, I would argue.
Great, lovely.
What about you, James? Do you have different views on especially on the sales part? We agree, I think, on the complexities of marketing, but sales somehow looks relatively straightforward after all these difficulties in R&D and manufacturing and marketing.
I think the key thing that pharmaceuticals has moved on from taking doctors to resort supports to encourage them to prescribe. That is long gone in my experience, and that's been a really healthy thing for the pharmaceuticals industry. It's much more concerned with science than it ever has been. And also, understandably, insurers and healthcare providers are much more concerned with the cost benefit of what they're paying for. And so we'll explore this more at the video when we discuss this. But just to conclude this video, I wanted to talk about the manage and support box and why that's interesting. And, you know, every organization has to have a strategy and be managed properly. The levels of scrutiny over the pharmaceuticals industry are huge, ranging from the quality of clinical trials to the quality of manufacturing and so on. And the senior management of a pharmaceuticals company have got to manage all of those issues, plus issues of which drugs are we going to try to specialize in. And that can include choices like, do we need to create a new research facility in a particular location, or do we need to work more closely with a university or a medical establishment? And it can also include, do I need to work more closely with a smaller pharmaceuticals company or another large pharmaceuticals company in an alliance or a collaboration? So the range of choices to be made at a strategic and a management level in pharma is huge. And then the other thing to say about support, so in that we'd be thinking about finance, we'd be thinking about IT and so on. Well, just to give you some flavor of this, you know, IT, we all need an IT system and remote working. Well, just think about this. IT is used in research and development to create computer models of how molecules behave. So we don't necessarily need to do all the same physical experiments that we would have done. So the IT software and modeling for that is totally different from what you might see elsewhere. And then similarly in finance, you know, if you're forecasting the cost of a pharmaceuticals product, you're basically forecasting for 90% of the things that you do to fail, because that's what happens in research and development. So the skills and the tools that you need to be a good finance person in pharmaceuticals are way different from what you might imagine in many other sectors and industries. So again, what I hope we'll be able to bring to life through these videos is, although strategy and support seem fairly straightforward, they actually become really interesting when we're talking about biopharma. Any other comments from you, Jaap, or any other summary comments before we finish this video?
No, James, not specifically, but I think you captured it very well. The amount of unknowns throughout the value chain are so massive that strategy and decision making are key. And the enablers in people, in IT and technology and financing, in those enabling functions, we'll touch on those when we do the next videos, but we'll see how important they are.
Exactly. Yes. And so in the next video, we'll talk about research and development. Yeah. Thank you so much again. Speak to you next time.
Thank you very much, James, and look forward to it.
Thank you. Bye.
Yes, bye.
Bye.